Good morning, everyone. This is the Environment Committee meeting of Thursday, April 21st, 2022 of the City of Rehoboth Beach. It is 10:30 a.m. and I call this meeting to order. I will do a roll call of the committee members. Charlie Garlow.
Present.
Heather Metz.
Here.
Catherine Bergwin. Catherine is absent. Eric Seward.
Here.
Joseph Vesio.
Here.
Mary Peck.
Here.
Nettie Green.
Here.
Okay, and we have a quorum of the committee to conduct business. First on the agenda is approval of minutes. Minutes from a meeting held on March 17th, 2022. I believe everyone has received a copy. Are there any comments, edits? Then I would offer open to a motion to adopt those minutes.
So moved.
We have a motion, and do we have a second?
Second.
We've got a motion and a second to adopt approve minutes from the meeting held on March 17th, 2022. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And the meeting minutes are approved.
Charlie, can you move the microphone
Oh.
closer to you?
Okay, is that better, Ann?
Thank you, Ann.
I think I recall at the March meeting, we also had not approved the February minutes either, but I don't know.
I
Am
will have
correct
I
in
will
that?
have to go back and check.
We had a discussion about them, and then we were going to
It's possible, Mary. I know
Yeah.
that there were revisions, and I sent them out to everyone. So take a
I
look.
will go back and check. We can't do anything with it today because it's not on the agenda, but if we did miss it, I will make sure it's on the next meeting. Old business, update and discuss the straw-free initiative. Just as a reminder, this was something that was put in place probably just about a year ago, a voluntary program for businesses to not automatically give straws and have tabletop signs encouraging folks not to use a straw, but if they absolutely needed one, to ask for it. And we've done some outreach and some additional outreach was requested. I believe a sample letter from the city officials, as well as I've asked Main Street to put it in one of their newsletters. They've got a pretty big outreach. I will need to follow up with the city on that. I don't know, Nettie, you drafted the letter. I'm not sure if that's the most effective way, but maybe putting it in the electronic newsletter correspondence that the city sends may capture more, but I'll follow up with the communication director for the city.
Could you put it in the electronic? I don't know how to do that. Put it into the electronic.
Yeah, we've got it. We've got a newsletter that is emailed out that is pretty good and is capturing a lot of attention.
Is there any possibility that there could be legislation from the commissioners with a date that this is going to be the law, you know, that straws upon request? And because it really is not, I mean, even the people that said that they would do it, some have, some haven't. And without that and a date at which that will be effective, it's not going to happen. The placards it's a failure, okay?
I wasn't here when you guys all had that initial discussion. Is there any feedback from you all on?
Well, I know that, in my travels, when I was talking to different restaurants, many of them were using paper straws, and they thought that that was a good alternative. So I guess we need to decide what our position is. Is it, are we okay with paper straws, or are we really pushing to just do straws upon request. So, I think that that's something we should take a position on.
And when you were having these discussions, and I don't recall, I believe how it was presented to us, the mayor and commissioners, it was presented as a voluntary program and not as proposed legislation. Is there a reason why it didn't come before us in that fashion?
I think at the time, when COVID hit, we were hesitant to put any sort of regulatory burdens on the businesses. They were already going through shutdowns and limited capacity, and I think that was really what slowed us down.
And I think during COVID also, people were leery about, people wanted to use straws just as a precaution. I think.
Putting their mouths on washed glass, yeah. Is there any state legislation that's on the horizon that would sort of supersede and dictate any of this?
The state legislature is considering a bill which would ban single-use plastic products, which would not include only straws, but also plastic lids or styrofoam cups or a lot of other stuff. I don't know whether it's going to pass or not, but it's out there.
There's a bill out there.
Do you know, Charlie, is that when that would come before the state?
No, I don't know.
Because maybe it would be, I mean, we kind of had that same thing with the plastic bags where we tried to do something and then the state kind of had already taken care of it for us. So maybe it would be, we could find out more about that and then maybe we could put our support to the state to get that enacted rather than trying to do it here, just, support them in that way.
If we want to draft legislation and offer it to the city, we have the ability to do that. I don't know if it'll pass or not, but we can put it forward if that's what this committee wants to do.
I think after speaking with Senator Lopez about my involvement in the first place with the environment, he said oftentimes the state acts from what individual municipalities decide to do, and we could be the example, and we could be an example with a very clear statement of straws upon request, any straws, rather than, dicing, mincing and dicing about paper or, plastic, or whether the paper has plastic on the inside and yada, yada, So, he said often the state responds to models.
Well, if that's the direction that any of you want to go, I would suggest that at the next meeting, we come prepared with something in writing, potentially some draft language of what an ordinance would look like, as well as getting an update from what the state is potentially doing and a timeline for that and maybe some feedback on how that's looking.
If I may, Senate Bill 140 and Senate Bill 134 have very similar language, both sponsored by Senator Paradis, and it's in the Senate Environment and Energy Committee, which would talk about single-use plastic items and polystyrene and styrofoam products. So it's a comprehensive approach on single-use plastic products. I don't know when the committee is going to take it up or vote on it or if they will or not. But that's already out there.
Okay.
There's no way of making a motion today. This is something our committee has been dealing with for probably 3 years. Just straws. And I mean, it seems, could we just make a motion today and have that go to the commissioners?
I hesitate, and I know Mayor Mills will hesitate putting anything on an agenda if we've not outlined an objective, a rationale, a reason why, and have some basis for why we're making a recommendation, and some draft language to start us off with. I also hesitate making motions on the fly without giving at least one meeting for the news cycle to entertain to the public that, hey, this is something we're considering, and allow people to come and give feedback on it. That's from a process standpoint, that's my preference, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So I think if we can table this to the next meeting, we come prepared with an outline of similarly like we put together, and it doesn't need to be the extent of the climate action plan template, but something similar to that where we identify the problem, what we're trying to solve, the reasons why, and our suggestions on how to accomplish it. And maybe Mr. Garlow, with some of his governmental connections, can maybe get some insight on where the Senate bill may stand.
I'll
And,
contact the Senate Energy and Environment Committee and see if they have any upcoming hearings or anything that would indicate movement of those bills that I mentioned.
Everyone happy with that path forward?
Yes.
Next on the agenda is the Sustainable Climate Action Plan. As it stands, what our proposal has gone to the mayor and commissioners. So I'm waiting for the mayor to put it on an agenda. It'll probably be one of the next workshop meetings for us to discuss how we would like to move this forward, and what role the mayor and commissioners will play, and giving this committee more direction on how to move that forward. And given that Dewey and some other local municipalities are doing the same, I think that's a good thing going for us, because I think we all want Rehoboth. If it's happening, and it's happening with other coastal municipalities, I think we all want to be the leader in that and not following others. So I think we've got that going for us. Any questions on that?
Per your suggestion, Edward, I've contacted Dave Davis and Commissioner Persinger in Dewey Beach, who are on their climate committee, to see if we can learn from them or find out what progress they've made. I would also note that the city of Lewis is also making progress on climate-related matters as well. We may want to coordinate with them if you want to do that.
Do you have any idea when it might come up for a workshop or discussion with the mayor and commissioners?
I imagine it would be one of the next couple meetings. But I'll get an update from Mayor Mills today on that.
Would you be willing to let us know when it's on? I know we can sort of follow the website, but
Yeah, no, I certainly
Okay.
will let you know, and I think we want to spread the word around to get others involved in that meeting as well. Next on the agenda is discussion related to gas-powered landscape equipment and use of them in the city of Rehoboth Beach. Mary, can I let you kind of lead this one?
I'm not sure where we left off last time, but we had it's on the table of passing a phase-in of, it's very similar to what Lewis did. And so the first step, I guess, would be to get it in front of the mayor and commissioners, whether they want to hold a public hearing on the concept. And the language would be pretty simple. All you'd have to do is decide which equipment and what dates to phase out. And I guess Eric had talked about also looking at our contracts that the city itself has with landscapers and what we want to do about those. But this is something I'd like to see it on, also similar to what Nettie was saying with the straw-free initiative. What do we have to do to get it in front of the mayor and commissioners? Do you need a particular format for that, or
Yeah, I think we'd want to see the same thing. Identify the problem and come up with a rationale and solutions and identify, Lewis has already done this. This is the format that they're using. Um, And I think, like I said at the last meeting, I want to predict some of the questions or challenges that the city's going to identify, right? We've got a lot of land here in Rehoboth Beach that the city uses those big
The vacuums,
tractor
yeah.
type mowing machines. How do you deal with something like that? And I think some of you identified that, oh, there is electronic equipment like that. And I don't remember who, but I think someone was going to reach out and do some more research on that. I don't remember exactly who that was. But identify some of those potential problems or issues and say, oh, it's not really a problem because here, that technology is already in place.
Well, I think probably the research I had done on what the approach that Lewis had taken was they proposed that they were going to ban gas-powered equipment, and then they set it up for public comment, and then the more appropriate, knowledgeable people, rather than we Environment Committee members, the landscapers themselves had the opportunity to come in and say what the issues would be, and I think that's probably more efficient than for.
Agreed, yeah.
Because I really don't know that much about landscaping equipment, and I could ask around, but I think it's better just to put it out there and get the comments from the public.
I agree.
Yeah.
I will note that I've just sent around to everybody a draft of talking paper on lawn equipment. It's not really in the same format like we use for the compliance, the climate action plan, in which you said, vision and the reasons for it and all that. If anybody here has their email open and you take a look at it, you can see that it's just a discussion of the topic and the fact that the Cape Gazette on the 24th of February ran an article on this topic, and it outlined some options. I mean, the Lewis does not ban the riding lawnmower type stuff, the lawn mowing. They do the phase out, rather, is what Lewis is doing, of the string trimmers and the leaf blowers, but not of the lawn mowers. And we may want to discuss as to whether or not we want to go farther than Lewis has done and also outlaw or ban or phase out the lawn mowers as well, maybe on an extended time frame or something to give them more time to get ready. Any feedback from anybody on that topic?
So you said, Charlie, that Lewis has already drafted it or already passed it?
They've already passed it.
They've already passed it.
And
Okay,
it's
so we
taking
should
effect.
definitely all do our diligence and read that, which I wasn't aware, so that would be a good place for us to all start, right?
Quickly, in 2020, Lewis adopted compliance dates of 2022 and 2025, giving those 2-year and 5-year advance notices.
Charlie, anytime you send documents like that, can you just make sure you copy Ann so it can be embedded on
Excellent.
the agenda if
I'll go back and do that.
needed?
Lewis is, they have an ordinance, very short and simple to read, but they had a whole process that they went through to get there, considering all sides of the argument. And the thing that Lewis has, which I would love to see us, they have a whole section in their code now called environmental regulation. And they have, so it's easy to find, and there's not a lot in there, but this particular thing is in there. And it's really short and sweet if you want to look at it.
Could you send that? Could you send that to us, Mary?
Yeah, I think I have done before, but I
Yeah.
will, yeah.
Because it sounds like that would be a very helpful thing for us to have. The short and simple, and this is where you look to find out what's regulated. Yeah.
Well, can we have a point person sort of take what Charlie has put together, look at the Lewis ordinance and mesh it into something that we can have in writing for us to move the process forward here? By a nod of heads, I'm assuming that mostly everyone on the committee wants to move this forward. Yeah. So if we can have a point person that is compiling all of this into a document that we can use, that would be helpful.
I don't mind being that point person.
Okay.
I just want to be kind of, I guess, clear as to what, are we looking for string trimmers or, you know, so I guess I'll put that out there. Are we going to do string trimmers or blowers, or are we going to model after Lewis, or just kind of look after that? Just, when I originally brought it up, I just thought that we would want the town to lead by example, you know, with a phase in. That was just, you know, so if we're going to make our residents be part of that, let's look at, you know, let's have an action for the town first. And I think that's how that went. And then we said, well, let's look at Lewis and see that. So I just want to be clear on what I'm kind of bringing this out. And then we talked about, you know, so we've examined Lewis. I can take a look at what Lewis has done, but I thought that, you know, what I thought was, you know, if we're going to phase in this for the residents, let's lead by example from the township, you know. So this is what we're doing, and this is what we're going to ask our residents to do, is kind of how I listened to the meeting last month that I didn't attend, and I think we all did some good work, and it just was confusion on what I thought.
Yeah,
But
I think it sort of morphed from what you had initially proposed. And then I said, okay, you know, I think we've read it in and voted on it as a recommendation.
Yep.
I brought it back so we could just get a second sort of view of it, and that morphed into, well, Lewis has already passed something, let's look at that.
Right.
Let's do it citywide. So, you know, and I think if you know, maybe we phase it in as the city, you know, we want the city to do it by, you know, 2022, you know, certain things throughout town by 2020, you know, we phase it in that fashion.
And we kind of talked about the city contractors. You know, I realize that the city, it's going to be very hard with those large machines, you know. So we kind of talked about, they write contracts for that. So I bring this all up, so I don't mind leading, but I want to know how we all feel, you know. So, but I thought that, you know, what I was understanding, I'm not sure that the city provides out a lot of contracts to bring in to do work, right? So reach out to those guys first, you know,
Were you thinking if the city owned string trimmers and leaf blowers, that they would use that equipment in a better way first and then reach out to the contractors and the residents at a later date? Because I don't really think the city owns too much in the way of string trimmers and leaf blowers. They usually just count on the contractors to have that gear.
Okay, yeah, that's fine. And that's what I think, you know, so if we're going to ask the work to be done, you know, I don't want to be out there with an electric one and see, you know, everybody out there and going, well, you made, you know, that's just my point. I agree. I don't know how much the city has, but what
Maybe
they
we could ask
do-
the city staff, like Mr. Williams or our new city manager.
So I just want to.
What do we have?
I would certainly want to invite Liz Lingo, who's the city arborist and manages most of those contracts,
Oh,
to
great.
come to the next meeting and participate in this dialogue.
That'd be great, Edward. Because, yeah, and I just want to make sure if we're going to do the work, because I want to make sure we're all together on this, right? So,
Yeah, I feel like one of the first goals would definitely be to have a meeting where we invite some of the regular contractors, the city, two parts, right? The city contractors and then the private contractors. But I think inviting the private contractors in to come in and find out what's feasible, what's economical, they might have some better ideas of things that they can offer, things that they can do.
exactly.
And nobody knows better than they do. So I think it's really, that would be, in my mind, step one before we start drafting legislation, to get an idea of what works.
Heather, yep, that's
So
a great way to.
Yeah, I don't know how we do that, though. How do we have that meeting?
Yeah, I know.
I don't know how
new
to
to
do
this. I
that.
don't know how to, yeah.
Let me have an
really done that.
initial meeting with Liz. and get some input from her on how she thinks best to move this forward.
I think it'll be a good way to gauge how much resistance, if any, there is too from the landscapers, from the contractors.
Yeah.
Yeah, and every municipality is different, and Rehoboth is certainly unique in that we have a lot of little lots where electric-powered equipment works really well, but then maybe we have some bigger parcels where it doesn't work so well, so maybe we need to have different rules for different applications. Just whatever contractors that we talk to, I think we'll have some really good solutions.
I think
And
the
I-
most important distinction is contractors versus homeowners. And I think contractors will be easier because they are already regulated in Lewis, and it's kind of a trend that they're anticipating. But if we're also going to require people, individual property owners who have gas-powered equipment to go out and buy electric equipment, that's going to be a whole different can of worms.
Yeah, and to Heather's point, I think by having the folks in here, they can educate us and help us before we require the residents, right? So that was how I thought it, what I thought was the right, or not what I proposed, not for homeowners right away to start, because I think that could be difficult right at first.
Mary, as you made a good point, there's a few different angles here: contractors, the city itself, homeowners, and I can tell you, just when we were talking about changing trash cans, people were upset that they would have to go out and buy a new trash can when the one that they have works perfectly fine. So
That's a little
that will-
different than a lawnmower.
that
right?
will give you, if that gives you any indication on some of the pushback, there you go.
May I point out that the Cape Gazette article, at least whether it's accurate or not, says the city of Lewis expects residents and landscaping companies to move to the other better equipment, and they've got the same sort of deadlines. So maybe we want to change that or do something different, I don't know. But that's what they say Lewis is doing, residents and contractors all complying at the same time.
Charlie, does Lewis provide any incentives for residents to switch to electric versus gas power? I'm just curious if
I
they
don't know.
said anything.
It
No,
doesn't,
I don't think so.
doesn't suggest that.
That's the thing about, it's really hard here in Rehoboth, and probably the same is true in Lewis. What incentive is there? We're already paying incredibly low taxes. How else do you incentivize? I don't know.
Chocolate chip cookies, maybe?
Well, Eric, to your point, I don't think we have a real consensus of exactly what we want to propose, but I think you have a general agreement that we'd like to do something, so.
And I will meet with Liz and get some feedback from her and share it to all of you, and that will potentially help guide us at the next meeting.
Maybe you could outline some of the options in your write-up. I'll give you the format that the mayor wants and the draft here, and you could make that as like options to do this or that.
Well, I want to be, I think, educated first, right? So, and I agree, I can look at the format, but I think if Miss Lingo comes in and kind of gives us, maybe helps us out with that, so. And what may or may not be a good way to go.
I think an initial compilation of all the information will help us all
Okay, yeah.
figure out our next steps.
I just took the concept of, okay, if we're gonna, it's a great idea for more reasons, the climate, the emissions, not only the noise, but the emissions, but, so my whole thing was kind of let's let the town lead by example, and then it kind of eases that in for the homeowners, right? So, so it starts at the top, that's.
Well, I think that my personal view is that we want to go as fast as we can, but the contracts, I don't think we want to get ourselves caught up in putting it in contracts as much as just an ordinance of a ban like Lewis did. That would be my proposal, that we just try and do what Lewis did and give everybody a date that they have to go to electric.
I agree with you,
Yeah,
Mayor.
I think
I
so
agree
too.
with you.
And define what that would, what pieces of equipment that
Yeah,
would be.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Then future contracts would just comply with that.
Oh, yeah. Small start, small steps, baby
Yeah.
steps, right? Yeah.
I think we've got a good path forward on that. Next on the agenda is discussion related to offshore wind farms and the potential impacts on coastal Delaware. At the last meeting, I think we had some technical challenges, but still a good discussion with Dr. Kempton, and I think provided more information to us, at least for me, than I didn't know. So I think we need to create a path forward now on what the pleasure of this committee is and what the next steps would be. Charlie, can I let you take the lead on discussing this one? And if you may already have some recommendations on how to proceed?
What does the city, what is the city being asked to do, since these are contracts with the state? I mean, what is it that we're even discussing, since it seems like this is just something that various companies, corporations have to put in billions of dollars to go out and check things out and then propose. I mean, we either say we're for it or against it, or, I mean, I don't know what we're discussing.
So I'll back up, and I think we outlined this maybe a little bit at the last meeting or the one before, but I mean, this started because other municipalities said, hey, Rehoboth Beach, please take a position on this like we have. And, we said, well, we're not going to do that until we know all of the facts, and we may not do it at all. And I think through that initial discussion, we identified that, we may want to take a position on it, we may not, but we may identify things that concerns us that we can then put in writing, send to our governor and state legislatures and say, these are things that you need to consider. These are things that we're concerned about. So that's kind of where I thought this would lead. That's
So
kind of how I was
We're
looking
basically
at it.
saying we're for offshore wind, or we're saying we're for it if these things can happen. I mean, see,
We
just
can
not clear
outline
what
it
we're gonna ask.
however you all want, but what I envision is a letter from this committee to the mayor and commissioner saying, you know, the Environment Committee thinks the mayor and commissioner should take this position on wind farms off our coast. However, these are things that we would like the city to advocate to the state legislature or the governor. That's sort of how I envision it, but I mean, it can be, we can take whatever position you want. I mean, it's whatever the pleasure of the committee is.
One thing
Or we
I've
can just drop
learned
it and not talk
Yeah,
about it
yeah,
anymore.
Yeah.
is, one thing I've learned is that in regard to the current projects that are in the pipeline, the one that's furthest along in the permitting process, sometime soon, there's going to be some kind of a step where another public notice and comment kind of step. And so I think probably what we should do is stay in the loop with the federal process and just make people aware if they have comments, concerns, when those opportunities are that actually have any sort of legal meaning, rather than just, the city itself I think, you know, as a municipality, we would be listened to more than an individual, but I think there's a real lack of understanding on most people's part how the whole thing works. And from what I understand, the federal, is it the Office of Ocean Energy Management? They're the ones that are going to be issuing permits and decisions. And I've also learned that the mayors of all the coastal towns in Delaware have an association that they get direct information about, and I guess Mayor Mills gets notified about the process, but if it could be more highlighted so that people understood. We don't necessarily, as a city, if we had concerns, we have to understand where they can be expressed and how the process works. And I actually did hear that somebody from that federal office probably would be willing to come and participate with us at some point, that they're always trying to improve public understanding, so.
And maybe we decide that is our only role, is to help educate our citizens.
Yeah.
On the other hand,
Because I truly don't understand it, you know, and is it a reality? Or is it to go outside Rehoboth for wind farms? Or, because I understand there's, the ones in Fenwick or that they're proposing, you have to have the feeds. I guess that's why they're taking down the Millsboro power plant, and then they're going to tie into those feeds. Is it a reality here? But I don't understand, I guess.
And I think, Mary, your point is well taken, that we need to hear from the federal group to really understand, because otherwise we're
Yeah.
just dealing with individual corporations who are, of course, wanting us to say either yay or nay. And, that's just, that doesn't help us. It's their point of view. And
I mean, I think from what I understand, there are a number of places offshore that have the initial, I don't know whether they're leases or what they are,
Agreements, yeah.
to develop. And so those have been approved. And so if we have concerns about environmental impacts of windmills, there is a process that it can be expressed. And I don't think, I was trying to figure out just myself, I have a number of citizen guides I've looked at and whatnot, where it is, and so, I short of like starting to read the Federal Register, which nobody does, I don't know how you know exactly where they are in the process. And what I was told is that this group of coastal mayors does get informed about what's going on offshore here in Delaware, but I don't know about the general public, so.
So
But
do we all agree, maybe the next step is we want to hear from a representative from BOEM? Is
Yeah.
that the?
yeah.
Is that the proper term?
Yeah,
yeah.
Yeah,
I-
that would
I
help
think
me.
That would help. Yeah, because otherwise we're just,
Voting yes or no.
voting yes or no. And I think we support wind power, but we have these questions. And so the questions can only be answered by a nonpartisan, non-partial,
Yeah.
person.
And like, initially, I said, I don't think anyone is going to say we don't support wind farms.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
sustainable energy like that. But I know almost everyone in this community is going to want to know how it affects their view on the beach. And I think that's going to be the number one concern from people in this area.
The other concern is where those cables come on shore.
Right, yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think from what I read, right now, they're doing they're out in the ocean doing topography and figuring out what's going to work best. And they said in May, they're going to be coming up with a proposal. So that will definitely be something for us to look at, because as we know, they, I think, rejected the other cable that was supposed to come on shore because of the middle of a park. So that'll definitely be something, and that will, I think, also help the project take shape when we realize, how, not only where the cables come in, but then the structures to support that. And so that will give us a little bit more information to go on too. So that's something to look for in the next month or so.
And maybe, maybe some, after we have this education ourselves, maybe some examples, some pictures of other places that have wind power and how, and what it looks like from the beach, rather than the basically propaganda stuff that I certainly have received from a group that, oh, this is the way the beach is now, and this is the way it will look,
I think Charlie, that's right, the project in Martha's Vineyard is already operational, so that's one opportunity. Weren't you saying that some people went up there and saw it and didn't have any objections?
There's the Block Island,
Oh,
Rhode Island
I'm sorry,
wind
Block
farm,
Island, yeah.
and
sorry, Block
Martha's
Island.
Vineyard in Massachusetts are right behind them, sort of,
Yeah.
but it hasn't been constructed in
Oh, okay,
Massachusetts
okay.
yet.
or
But
even in European countries. I mean, from, pictures there.
Well,
So-
things are changing a lot from what exists. Like what's being proposed here is not going to look the same as what's out there already. But the other thing, I don't know if everyone knows, but Suzanne Thurman of the Mirror Group, she's against windmill, offshore wind. She wrote a long editorial that got published in the Wilmington News Journal about the potential effects on marine life. And so, I think we want to hear that too. We want to understand that.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Charlie, what was the project that's already completed?
that's the Block Island, which is an island right off the coast of Rhode Island, and they have a small number, I think it's 5 turbines, and they're not as big as the newer ones that they're proposing now, so it's a smaller scale, really, than what we or others here in Lower Delaware would be facing. But the results, from what I've seen, is that it has not blighted the seascape such that it would drive people away as tourists. In fact, they've even had more tourists coming because they want to come take a look at these things. I'm one of those people who went up there and spent money at a bed and breakfast to take a look at it.
This month's Smithsonian Magazine, their cover story is on Block Island, the wind farm on Block Island. So if anyone gets Smithsonian Magazine or wants to go online, it's a good article. They go into detail too.
I think there is a lot, that's one concern. There's a lot of concerns. And if you guys mind if just read a couple of categories I kind of put it into, of things to think about, and maybe, those are just different positions that we think about. So location is one, obviously, the location off the shore, but also the location of the cables coming in and the location of the support equipment. So those are all going to have environmental impacts as well as visual impacts. So, we got a short coastline here. It's not like there's not a lot of room. So, those are things to think about. The size of the project, are they going to continue with the current size and the current phasing, the timing of the project? And I don't know if this is something we even want to get involved in, but the cost, and that's something that I've been doing a lot of research with because there's a lot of stuff going on with the Virginia project right now. That's kind of up and running, and there's a lot of issues. There's a lot of stuff coming out there, and concerns about cost. So obviously for us, the environmental impact, and in my mind, the question there is, we know there's going to be one, but who's going to be monitoring it? What information are we going to get? Are they going to be forthcoming with that information? What are we going to do with that information? That's the monitoring of that is a big thing, because we're not going to all be there on the beach with our binoculars, watching what's going on. So there needs to be some. I haven't read anything in the Orsted stuff that really says, they say they're going to do it, but we don't know how. And then also for us to just keep our eye on challenges that have come up in the other projects that we mentioned, specifically what's going on in Virginia. And not that you guys want to all read up on that, but there is a lot of information coming out about that. So just some categories to think about, and
When you say cost,
moving forward.
You mean to the ratepayers or?
Yeah, because we're ratepayers too. So that cost is ultimately going to come down to all of us, and we're ratepayers too. So
Go ahead.
So Heather, all those things, so it had to be done, that gets captured in like an environmental impact study, right? So were studies done? I don't know, for the ones that are being built, that would be similar?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, there's
so
a lot
had
of,
they done one for this one that
Yeah.
they're
well,
proposing?
there's,
Yeah.
there's a lot of good information out there. I was
Is it a-
actually reading some excerpts from some contract requirements for the contractors that actually go out there and with their equipment on the platforms and start building the platforms, that there's all kinds of monitoring that they have to do. There's certain, things they're allowed to do, things they're not allowed to do, whatever. Skip the details. But that's between them and between the contractor and their requirements. There's no way to get that information back to us. Like, we are never going to know what happened.
Well, there had to be a study, right? I mean, that's what I was saying already,
I'm
that we can get
sure.
a
I
hold.
haven't read those
yeah.
studies, but I'm sure there are. But I guess what I'm talking about is, once the study is done, then they set the requirements, and then somebody needs to monitor what's actually happening.
Okay.
And I don't know that there's a way for that information to ever come back. I don't know what happens with that
Right,
information. So
okay.
it's something that, we all concerned about. You don't want to say, yeah, I'm all for windmills, and they put the windmill up there, and then you have this huge environmental impact, and you say, oh, well, we didn't know.
Yeah.
So we just want to have some kind of information sharing so that we
I think
know.
with Delaware offshore wind, the only one that's really in the far along enough that there's actually a design, and I think it's been approved as far as the wind farm and what it's going to be. Technically, it still has not reached the environmental impact statement review yet, from what Ørsted has told me.
Are they going to do individual?
They have, I think it's
Locations?
as a wind farm, like it's
General,
a
okay.
skipjack wind farm. As far as I recall, they actually have the design has been done, and they're pretty far along. They know where it is and what it's going to be, but they haven't been approved through the NEPA process yet, which is coming very soon, from what I hear.
Mary, for the sake of the public, what is NEPA?
That's the environmental impact assessment that they have to do. So, and that's, from what I understand about NEPA, it's a pretty broad process, and it's not necessarily something that's going to be a yes or a no point for them. It's more like they have to analyze everything out there, and the agency will consider public comments in that process as well. So that's a big point for opportunity for public comment on environmental impact issues that they still haven't got through that yet.
Okay.
And the other potential projects are much earlier on, but I think to everybody's point, it would be helpful if the companies involved could be a little bit more forthcoming. Maybe they are, and people just don't know where to look or read. But what are the points where public comments can be made that would be considered by BOEM, which is the agency? I know that they do work with the states, and the municipalities have more of a say than general public. But so also it would be good to know. I mean, for us, the committee, this was the first I knew that our mayor actually is involved in a commission or a group that already is in the loop with this offshore wind. And so, he may know more than we do as far as.
And he, whenever there's anything that comes up, he will forward it to me, but there has not been anything significant recently.
Yeah.
And all of those, the Association of Coastal Towns is the name of the group. Those are all open to the public as well. And I can start forwarding those dates to the committee in case anyone ever wants to attend. So it sounds like we've got a path forward. Mary, it sounds like you already know someone to talk to someone at BOEM, so I'll connect with you and see if we can make an arrangement to hear from someone. But let's move forward because we've got some other stuff on the agenda, and I think we've got a good path forward on that topic. So we've got 4 items under new business. I don't think we're going to get to all of them. Do we want to prioritize? Does anyone feel pretty strongly about prioritizing one over the other?
I feel that the non-idling policy is really old business. We have talked about this before.
We can go ahead and start with that one if you'd like.
I think it's important to deal with, yeah.
Sure. So as background, I don't know if it came from this committee. I don't think this committee started, but I want to say 6, 7 years ago, maybe. Maybe it was less than that. One of the commissioners suggested that we have this policy or the law of anti-idling in the city of Rehoboth. That was proposed, that was adopted as a resolution, so not an ordinance, a resolution. So that does exist in the city of Rehoboth Beach. However, it's not a law, so it has no enforcement teeth behind it. So that's the background. It sounds like,
We had discussed it.
Right.
We didn't make any,
so it sounds like this committee wants to discuss again, giving a little bit more enforcement teeth on that. Is
I
that,
wonder if we could get on the same meeting that when you get the straws and some other things for the mayor and commissioner workshop, if we can get on that meeting with the idea of an anti-idling ordinance, just to kind of move it out of this committee, because we've talked about it for a while, but it will, and it is something that will improve the quality of life of our residents. We do get letters from time to time and complaints about idling, and it seems to me it's, something that needs to move out of the committee and into the mayor and commissioner workshop level.
Commissioner, can I just ask you, is it more beneficial for us to make a motion saying we would like the mayor and commissioners to take up an anti-idling policy, or is your preference for us to actually have a draft with specifics and pass it on up? I know every situation is a little different, so.
yeah, I think in this particular topic, I'd have to go back and look at the resolution that already exists, and it could be as easy as just recommending that resolution be changed into an ordinance, rather than starting, we don't want to start from scratch. It's already there. Why not just utilize what's already there and say we want to change it from a resolution to an ordinance with some enforcement behind it?
what is the resolution? Do you have
I don't.
access to
We've
that?
had it
I
in front of
do.
us before, but
Yeah.
it's very general, and I think that's a great suggestion, Ed, if you're willing to just tell your solicitor, we want to turn this into an ordinance,
An
perfect.
ordinance, yeah.
But it would require a little bit of, a little more work, and obviously it'll involve public comment, but,
At our next meeting, I'll bring that resolution forward so we can take a fresh look at it. And then at that time, we can make a motion on taking whatever action that we want to. And I may have a brief discussion with the city solicitor before that.
the one thing I will say, the city of Newark is probably the one city in Delaware that has an anti-idling ordinance, and so it gets a little bit more specific about things like exceptions and, stuff like that, which your solicitor could work out or we could propose, but I
I
think.
have it right here. Do you guys want to hear it?
Yeah.
These are my papers from when we first discussed
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
So it's pretty simple. It's 3 things. Newark, Delaware, the idling law states, idling a vehicle engine for more than 5 consecutive minutes in a 60-minute period is prohibited. The penalty is a warning and then a $100 fine. And then there are certain exceptions, which are if the temperature is below a certain degrees, if it's a few other exceptions. They make exceptions for if it's a work vehicle or a refrigerated truck. So there have to be some exceptions, obviously, for work trucks, but that's just, it's pretty basic. I have the Newark, this is from when we discussed it the first time.
Yeah.
I have the Newark one, the New York City one, the Philadelphia one, for examples. And if you want, I can
Can you forward those?
smush those together, or I can send you the whole.
Yeah, if you could send those to me, and then I will send out the resolution with all of those, which I think will help
And they
our
can
next discussion
pick-
and
pick and
recommendation.
choose, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think we need to discuss it any further. I mean, I just think, just,
Well, I would
Your
like to
idea of
discuss it a
the-
little further, because,
You want to get into citizen enforcement?
well, yeah, there are a lot of parts of this that would benefit, I think, from some discussion. Some of these other laws that have been passed, like there's a state law, according to this article that I sent forward to you all, that says you cannot leave a motor vehicle unattended without first stopping the engine, locking the ignition, removing the key, and setting the brake.
And that's a state law.
That's a state law, according to this article here in the Delaware Online. I presume that that's correct. I haven't reviewed the law itself,
That's interesting.
but a lot of these other cities have had idling no longer than 5 minutes or something like that. Those make it very difficult to enforce, because that means that a police officer, or if there's a citizen enforcer with their little camera, could stand there for 5 minutes taking a picture of it to compile the evidence. They have to be sitting there breathing exhaust for 5 minutes. That's not smart. Why don't we just have the rule say no idling? That way, people get in the habit of when you stop your car and you want to go into a store or your home, you turn it off and you take the key with you, rather than having to say, oh, I'm only going to be a few minutes, and then there's that much idling, and then it turns into, actually, it was 15 minutes that they were out there idling, and no one's catching them. If people just get in the good habit of turning off their engine when they don't need it, just like putting on your seatbelts, it's a good thing. People get into the habits, just people remember after a while to do that. You almost
But
feel
then
naked
you-
if you don't have your seatbelt on, you know, that
but,
sort of
but
an
then,
idea.
Charlie, you get into, I mean, somebody, oh, I'm about to turn it off. I mean, so when is there a regulation? And with any regulation, I mean, speeding, everything, it's the occasional. I mean, we all speed from here to, Route 1, okay. But it's when you're picked up, that's when it's enforced. So it allows police to enforce if it goes for 5 minutes. There's no discussion, you know, it's.
One thing I've noticed, now, the state has, in terms of their environmental regulations, they do have anti-idling for the big tractor trailers. And I did notice, this is just my own unofficial observation walking around town, the big tractor trailers aren't the violators anymore. And so they know they are regulated, and it does seem to work. And it's the smaller trucks are not regulated by DNREC and are still idling. But these people, a lot of times there's a disconnect between the owner of the company and the workers. And sometimes it's pretty, and it would actually, and as people I know one business person who does have trucks, and he doesn't want his employees to idle them because it costs him money. And so it's just kind of an ignorance thing. And from talking to people in the city of Newark, the time that we did, their program, they have the ordinance, and they said they put signs in some of the areas of the city where it's more common, and they haven't had to do a whole lot more. They saying, you know, idling is banned according to this statute, and here are the fines. And so, you know, it's not as difficult as we might think it would be to do this thing. And right now, you know, you'll find people in their landscape trucks, and I happen to personally know one city resident who will confront people, and she gets blown off every time, and they just, you know, ignore her. But so if there was just that little bit more, you know, of, well, that it is against the law, I think that would really be not so difficult to do and very helpful.
I wonder if we'll see more of a change with gas prices being so
Yeah,
high
I was
now,
like, who wants to idle right now?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
right.
you're wasting money whether you are idling at $3 a gallon or at $4 a gallon. You'd think if people cared about money, they'd turn it off.
Yeah.
But I
I-
think it's simpler than we're making it out. Yeah.
Heather, can I ask you to compile the current resolution, those three municipalities that you already have, And if we can try to find the state law, the Delaware state law related to,
Send that around.
yeah, if you could compile those three things, I think that would be helpful. Are you guys okay moving on to, we'll do one more topic here.
I hate to speak up again about choice, but there were things that I was writing about for the agenda for today, and to me, the water fountains
Sure.
would have something to do with the recycling of reusable bottles. And I think if we're asking people to bring their own bottles, and one of our biggest polluters are water bottles on the beach. And so I think that water fountains, this is also something we have discussed, having particularly the water fountains that cool the water and filter the water at maybe the bathrooms. We've talked about this previously.
And we currently in the city do not have any of those?
Well, there are some here within this building.
Within this building.
Yeah, but not out in the public areas, which is what I think you were talking about,
Yeah,
Nettie.
yeah.
You wanted them at the bathrooms here on Rehoboth Avenue down by the bandstand or some other places.
Or the other, the bathrooms that are at the different places. And people could fill up their, they could fill up their canteens. We do have a water fountain at the very far south end, just a, bubbler water fountain. But I would think that would be just so helpful.
Well, it's money.
Well, we're talking three water fountains, because it would be the bathroom, up here where the lifeguard station is. And there's
Baltimore,
proposed a
Rehoboth, and Delaware.
new lifeguard station, as I
The
understand.
new one should definitely have one.
Yeah,
That
the
should be in
new
the
one
plans
definitely
already.
should
We
have
should
one.
make sure of that.
And
'cause
then-
that's
and
an
then-
opportunity.
And then the upscaled bathrooms, which have been improved upon, which are very close to the cupola or Hope Avenue, and the one next to Funland. I mean, those would,
Yep.
I just think that would be fantastic.
Let me,
To me, an ideal place would be where they already have water where you wash off your feet with the sand, because a lot of,
Yeah,
you know,
just a
a lot-
bubbler there where you could.
well, you
the
could
water
fill it,
fountain.
have
Yeah.
those machines like you see in the gyms, that you fill
Yeah.
up. But the water's already there, so you just
That's
would
right.
have the equipment of
Yeah.
the equipment. And coming off the beach, that's where I think a lot of people would use water, right?
Which would be just another
As well as the
fixture
bathrooms.
on that pole, I would think.
Yeah, it would just be another, so I don't know. I just saying, I know people use them on the beach, the water bottles, so.
Let me talk to the
And the
public.
water's there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
let me,
we talked about that a while ago, and there were some issues with those machines are a little fussy in the outdoors, and it's definitely would be nice to have, I agree, but,
Yeah, they work great in the gyms.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're really nice and keeps track of how many water bottles you save. I keep
Yeah,
looking at
I
that.
know, they
I
have
love
one at the
seeing
Sussex
that.
Yeah,
Y.
me too.
Yeah.
On the buildings where there's the bathroom and the lifeguard station, you could definitely have them because there's electricity there, there's, they can put the machine inside the walls. But where the feet washing station are, just to have a regular, just even a little,
Yeah, just,
so you can stick your bottle under there. It doesn't have to have
Sure.
electricity and chilled and filtered and all that
Yeah, it
stuff.
doesn't, right.
But that's very doable, and that would be,
Yeah.
it wasn't,
Our
you guys
former
refresh?
member Janet, she was instrumental in getting one at Epworth, and she knew all the ins and outs, and it's too bad she's not here because there were some interesting facts about getting those and how
well,
much
it was
they
just at
were.
a different level where
Yeah.
the bubbler had been before. It was a different level, so it cost more. You can just go online and price those, because
Yeah.
we've offered it at, my husband and I, at the Film Society, and that hasn't happened yet, but.
Oh,
you
really?
know, oh, yeah. You can just go online and, they sell these water fountains that filter and cool the water and show you how many bottles, I don't know what they're
Yeah.
called. Yeah.
Well, that's something to get into the city budget discussion, I guess.
let me have a discussion with Kevin Williams, our Public Works Director. and see if this is something that he's even thought about before, if it's planned for any of the new buildings, and let's kind of go from there.
And maybe the boardwalk committee should have it on their plate, too.
Yep. I will talk to Commissioner Legree and see if his committee will talk about it. With that,
The only other thing I see there was pollinator gardens.
can you do this very quick?
You bet. I sent around to everybody here a draft of a proposal on pollinator gardens, which doesn't really require anybody to do anything. It's more or less encouraging people to, if we can develop some incentives to encourage people to use, instead of having so much grass, to plant pollinator gardens instead that will benefit our butterflies and other sorts of pollinators, because they're all, on the endangered species list or close to it, so that we would encourage those kinds of plantings, especially when it comes to the city should take the lead, and wherever we have a, space that's just grass, let's put in pollinator gardens to set a good example for the residents. Banning pesticides that would kill these pollinators in our city would be another part of that program. You can take a look at that and see if you think you have thoughts on that topic. We should modify our contracts with our landscapers to get rid of the grass and plant pollinators instead, wherever the city owns property. That's part of what I've written up there. I'd be glad to have your feedback.
Well, I think that's great, Charlie. Newcastle County and also the state of Delaware both have rules for themselves on native plants on their property that they own and plant. And so that would be a great first step here in Rehoboth, if at least the city, when it does its own landscaping and planting, use native plants. And then the next level, I guess, is to consider is whether there's some way we can incentivize private property owners to use natives. And then the other thing is your pesticides, which I'm not sure what we can do with that, but on a city level, I guess the city could look at that for themselves. I don't know what we could do with private property owners.
It'll be interesting to know if there's any prohibition on cities taking a strong stand on pesticides. I haven't researched that, but it seems to me usually if there's a federal government restriction on pesticides, it's not banning it entirely, but then it allows states and local governments to have more strict standards if they choose to do so. There may be an exception with pesticides. I don't know.
One thing I learned with my stormwater task force reading materials is that pesticides and fertilizers actually have some tax exemptions and things that are actually encouraging their use.
I'm shocked to hear that.
I know. And so, because I was reading how, that's a big issue in stormwater, of course, is the pesticides and fertilizers. And some states are taking action to at least close this loophole on their, and I forget what the fee was or something they're exempt from, but it's definitely something to look at, especially here with our stormwater issues and not, in addition to the pollinators, there's the water pollution issue. So it's a big,
Which kind of leads us to D, which is the brainstorming with other community organizations, which I think that at some point, I don't know when, our group we need to have a workshop, a day or something where we can coordinate with the stormwater people, the lakes people, the SOLA, elementary school even, the tree group.
Would you like to be that chairperson, Nettie?
Sorry, Ann, go ahead.
Well, only if it's possible. Only if we could have a possible time when we could do that. Because I think this is something Newark did, it's something Newark suggested, it's worked very well for them. And I think other people, I mean, the solar people get in touch with me about what's going on about the straws, because I was asked to get in touch with them, and I don't know. I mean, it's like we haven't, it hasn't happened, it's beginning to. So I think we need to come together as a,
So you're thinking a, half-day workshop type thing? Okay.
yeah, but they'd all have to be involved and willing to do it.
It would be good to see what other cities or counties have done on pollinator policies. That's a little bit of
Yeah,
research.
Yeah.
All right, so Charlie, you're gonna research bans on pesticides. Someone else want to research what other municipalities have done?
We've heard at great length what Newark's done with getting different groups together, but I don't know what they've done with in Newark about the pollinators.
Well, Nettie, if you could send me some examples with what other municipalities have done with getting, doing workshops with other groups.
Okay, all
That
I
would be
could,
great.
all I could send you is what Newark.
Okay, that would be
We
fine.
I could get them to send us what they've done, yeah.
Okay,
You may note from the write-up that the state of Delaware has already passed a bill which bans the sale of invasive plants, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to have pollinator-friendly plants. So, anyway.
Invasive plants is a smaller list than, there's a lot of ornamental, non-native ornamentals that are still okay to sell, but
well, related to that agenda topic, I will also, when I meet with Ms. Lingo, I will get her feedback on this as well.
she has, that, there's definitely an overlap with our tree ordinance, and when people plant trees in this, as part of their requirement, if they get into the regulated area by virtue of either removing a tree and having to replace a tree, the city does require native trees. She has a list, and you do have to do that.
And
but-
it's, we're currently drafting a new tree ordinance, and it's going to be even more restrictive with the type of trees that
Oh, really?
you can plant. So with that, I'm going to move on to setting our next meeting, which is May 19th at 10:30. Are there any final committee member comments?
I have one quick one.
Yeah.
Just as a follow-up to something we did in the past, Dark Sky Week is starting April 22nd. And one little suggestion from the Dark Skies group is for everybody, all you listening out there, to go and survey your property and make sure you don't have any exterior lights that are shining up. All your exterior lights should be covered on the top and only shining down, and only use the wattage that you need. Dimmers, timers, those are all really beneficial. And if anybody's really motivated, Dark Skies has on their website where you can organize a community walk, and you can kind of walk around and just do a little survey of what's going on in your community. Just wanted to put that out there.
Heather, do you know what the story is on the lights on Rehoboth Avenue? I don't think they're dark sky friendly, at least the ones I've seen.
I don't, and I haven't heard anything about that. Yeah, I
Not-
think.
Not on our agenda, so we can't talk about it.
Yeah, that's,
Okay,
yeah.
The other, it's just a comment. When are the recycling bins going to be put out?
I have heard from the Public Works Director that it is imminent. I mean, before the season starts, they will be out.
Oh, okay, that's good news.
So as soon as I get a date, I will share it with all of you.
We will have a celebration.
All right, I'm going to, there's no citizens here for citizen comment, so I adjourn the meeting at 11:45 a.m. Thank you.
Okay.
Another great meeting. We were allowed